Okay, today I'm just going to go over 10 tips and tricks or hacks, things that you can do that could make your life a little bit easier as far as using the overall application. So we'll hit these 10 topics, selection tips, moving objects, duplicating objects, grouping objects, camera keyboard shortcuts, cropping images on screens, changing object colors, keeping objects aligned with snapping, resolution settings, and fast measurement tools and options that we have there. So, first off, we have selection tips. So if I have a number of things in my scene, so let's go ahead and just drag in, I'll just drag in a sort of template like this. And to be able to select different things, I have a number of options here. So one is that I can hold the shift key on my keyboard, and all of these shortcuts you can find up here as well if you go to shortcuts. But I'm gonna hold shift on my keyboard and then select other objects. And that's going to allow me to select all three of these objects, and now I can move them around like this. Another option that I have is to click and drag objects. So because this is in 3D, what I need to do is hover my mouse over an object in the 3D space here, and then click and drag to my right, and then let go once I'm on top of the last object that I want. So that will select those four objects there. Same thing with, let's say, this decor right here. I can click and drag over this. When objects are really close together like this, you kind of need to be a little more subtle with it. So I might make sure that my mouse is hovering over a solid point of the solid spot in that decor. And if it does select the object behind it, what I can do is hold shift and click that object that I don't want, and that will deselect the object. And now I have these ones selected here. And then let's see, any other things with selecting objects. Basically, holding shift will allow you to select multiple objects, and then holding shift again and selecting a selected object will deselect that object, if that makes sense. All right, next up we have moving objects. So let's see here. If I wanted to move an object, there's a few ways to do it. So if I select these objects again, you have these three let's say blue, red, and green arrows that you have here by default. And the red arrow is just going to move the object left and right. The green one's going to move it forward and backward. And then the blue arrow is going to move it up and down. If I go into my top camera view here, I'm just going to see the green and red arrow, so I can move it left and forward. If I go to the front camera view, I will see the blue up and down and left and right. And then as a kind of shortcut, an additional way to move objects is with your arrow keys on your keyboard. So I can move it slightly up and down, left and right with my keys on my keyboard. All right, now we'll go over duplicating objects. So to duplicate an object, you can have a number of objects selected, something like this, and then I can hit this duplicate button right here, or alternatively, I can hold Command or Alt on my keyboard and then just drag one of these arrows up, and that will duplicate the objects. As you can see, I'm just holding Command and then dragging the arrow, and it's creating multiple objects. If I hit the duplicate button, it's going to duplicate them, but it's going to leave them in the same spot they were, and then you just have to move the objects. So if I move it up that way, now you can see that there's multiple objects there. The reason for doing this is that if you wanted the objects to be moved in a very specific amount, you can change the snapping setting. So maybe I want them to be moved by 1 foot, so I would duplicate them, move it up, and now it's up by 1 foot, so I have precise space there. All right, grouping objects. So grouping objects is really nice to have once you have a lot of stuff in your scene. So I'm using this template here right now, and most of the objects in this template are not grouped together, and I probably wouldn't need most of them to be grouped together, but some of them it would be nicer to have them grouped together. So let's take again these 4 lights at the top here. If I click and drag over them, I have the 4 selected. If I select more than one object, then on the right side over here, you're going to see a little option to group items. So I'm going to click this blue button here, and now these objects are all grouped together. So if I click off of them and then back onto them, it will select all of them. So this will be nice to have if I wanted to group, let's say, these scenery pieces right here. So now I'll group these together. And now when I just move this back a little bit, when I select the scenery, it will select all of them. All right. And so, yeah, so grouping is really nice to have. You can click, let's say one, hold shift, click multiple objects here, and then group them together. And now they're all grouped together. And then if I wanted to, let's say, just move one of these objects instead of ungrouping the objects. So if I select them, it's going to show me that I can ungroup them here. What I can do instead is go up to selection and hit the group lock button here. And that will allow me to just select objects within the group. So basically it unlocks all of the groups. So you can now select any group. And then if I lock all groups again, it will have all groups locked again. Camera keyboard shortcuts. So this is definitely really helpful when you want to move between your camera views really quickly. So the camera views are up here in view. If you go, you can have the top camera view, left, right, front, orbit, first person, and then saved camera views over here. But if you want to move a bit faster within the program, you probably want to use the shortcuts. So you can see them in the shortcut menu up here. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all on your keyboard that will switch between these camera views, and then O on your keyboard will switch to orbit camera view. So by default, if you hit O, this is the orbit camera view. It allows you to orbit around things. And if you hit 1 on your keyboard, this is going to be first person. First person allows you to kind of look around like this and then move around. 2 is going to be top view, 3 is front view, 4 is left, 5 is right. So moving between those can really speed up your camera views really quickly. And then another thing that's really nice with kind of navigating around your camera views is to use this zoom button here, or use F as in Frank on your keyboard. And that will allow you to zoom into the selected object. So kind of focusing, if you will. So F for focus maybe on your selected object. So if I was in my top view here and I wanted to really quickly focus in on this piece of truss, I just hit F, and now my camera's centered on that object there. So this can be really nice to have when you're working on a specific object, or maybe you want to go from the orbit camera view to, let's say, this single light over here. I just hit F on my keyboard, and now I can see that light exactly. And then back to orbit. All right, so next would be cropping images on screen. So if I add a image to these screens here, let's say we have this image here. What I can do here is, let's say I don't want to see all of this image. I maybe want to crop out some of it. I can use these sliders over here on the right side of the screen to stretch and move the graphic that's on the screen. So I'm going to, let's say I stretch it in the X direction. Let me turn off the group lock here. So I'm going to want to select all of them. I think if they're in a group, you need to kind of go into the group and select them all individually. Oops. So I'll select all 3 of these, and then I'm going to stretch them this way, and then move them a little bit, and then maybe I'll move them in the Y direction a little bit, and then stretch them. Cool. And so this helps a lot if you want just a certain area of your graphic to be shown. And this works with different screens as well. So you could do it with an LED wall, I think TV monitors as well. You can do that with that. All right, next is changing object colors. So whenever you select an object, you can see if potentially you can change colors by just going over to the color picker right here and try to adjust colors. So all lights are going to automatically be able to be changed with the color picker over here. And then some objects. So if you ever want to try to change the color of an object, just go ahead and see if it works with the color picker. So if I select these 3 screens right here, I change the color and it changes the color of the drape. So it works differently for different objects. So you just kind of have to play with it to see what it might affect. So this drape right here in the back, you can change that as well. And now that's a different color. And so that'll work again for a lot of objects. I might, if I select this, let's see, if I select this tile here, I believe I might be able to change, I can change the color of it as well. You can also add images to certain things too. So you can select different things. Like if I selected this object and actually added a graphic to this, it's going to add a graphic to the image as well. So you can add logos and stuff like that sometimes if you want. Okay, next would be keeping objects aligned with snapping. So this is definitely important if you want to, let's move this out here, bring it up here. If I want to, let's say, create objects and I want them all to be aligned, so this works pretty well with scenery, and maybe if you're setting up seating and things like that. So what I would do here is I would go over to the snap settings on the right here, and I'm going to change this to however many feet or inches I want to change it to move by. So in this case, this object, I'm going to look up here, and it's going to say that the approximate size of this object is 4 feet wide. So in the X direction, this way wide, and it's about 12 feet high in the Z direction, which is up and down. Okay, so 4 feet will give me pretty much exactly to be right next to it. So I'm going to duplicate the object and then move it over once, and it'll be exactly 4 feet. So now if, let's say I want a 4-foot space in between them, I'm just going to do that. Maybe I select both of them and then duplicate them again. And now I have 4 pieces that are exactly 4 feet apart from each other. And if you wanted it to be kind of even more like a smaller distance, you can go up here to settings and change this to centimeters or inches. So if I change this, maybe I want it to be like 6 inches or something. I can now duplicate this object and move it over, and now it'll move every 6 inches. Cool. So super helpful if you're trying to make sure that certain objects are a specific distance from each other. You can always check this as well by coming up here to the top view and say measuring it, if you will. So you could look, all these squares are 1 foot squared. So I could, if I hold here, click and drag over, and then I measure over here up the top, it'll tell me how many inches these are apart from each other. All right, let's move on to the next one, which would be resolution settings. So you can change, let me just, okay, let's move this over here. So you can change the resolution settings up here in the settings button from, I think by default, when you load in, it will start at 1080, which is high. But then you have this extra option up down here, which is very high, 1080 and it's 100% resolution. So it's the highest you're going to be able to get. If you save your project at any of these resolutions, it will save, so that when next time you load in the application, at least in that project, it will load that specific resolution, so you don't have to change it. So just some things to note about this is that it increases performance a tiny bit. It's not super noticeable, but it can help sometimes with the streaming. If you're loading the application online and you want to try changing the settings based off of however good your internet connection is, you can try changing these settings to help out with performance with your internet if you want to try that. But usually I would always go to the highest setting when I'm creating a final rendering, which just kind of gives it a little bit more clarity. All right, and then finally, fast measurements with diagrams. So let's say you want to create some diagrams or just some quick measurements. Let's say I'm going to move, create a new truss line over here, and then I'm going to group these together. So what you can do is create a measurement here with this measure button. Let me see here. If I just hit measure, it'll show me how long this this piece of truss is here. Change this back to feet. And so this is really handy with basically just in this top view, you get this extra measure button here. You can also go to your markup button here, ruler, and then kind of create a manual measurement by doing this. This is going to measure every 0.5 feet when it's snapping to the grid. But if you turn that off, there's no snapping. But yeah, this can be really nice. Let's say if I want to create just some different measurements in general, select all these. Oh, that's why nothing's grouped. Here we go. So I'll say I want to know the distance between all these lights. I'll just hit measure, and it'll tell me the distance there. And then maybe I want to measure the whole group here. So anyways, just a quick way to measure things that way, but you do have these extra options to use the ruler as well to do that. And then I guess finally, if you want to create diagrams, there's a couple options here. So you can go up to visuals, and if you change the color up here, you get a few different options to show from your sort of top-down view. If you want to create like a white and black diagram like this, you can do this. Or if you want to show the sort of base colors of everything, you have this option as well. So you just click this button a few times and it'll scroll through the different options here. So you can kind of play with these. And then finally just hit render. You can render it in 4K, and then that will spit out basically a high resolution rendering. And then you can render a second image that will basically give you a separate image of just the measurements. And so you can kind of overlay the two. So you have two separate images there, and you can use those both for your diagram. All right, so that's it for this one. Let me know in the comments or anywhere If you have any additional things that you want to see, maybe I can make another one of these with more tips of different things. So anyways, thanks for watching.